There you go. All right, I think Elmer might have been having trouble to get on. Let's see here.
So far, Brent is the only one that had to decline the invite. He's probably got some meetings on or something.
Okay. So you're still in Mexico, Doc?
Yep.
I remember you were saying you were thinking about going back to San Diego.
Financially just doesn't make any sense.
No, huh?
Place here is paid for, and
Sure.
to rent up there, I'd be looking at $2 or $3 grand a month. It just doesn't make sense. Hello, Alan.
Looks like he's getting his headset working. Still mute. Sounds like your audio is not coming through. Can you hear us okay? Thumbs up? Nothing yet.
Nope, can't hear you, mate.
Nope.
Now you're showing muted. Okay, lower left of your screen, Alan, you can unmute. There you go. Got you. We got you.
There you are. What's up, Alan?
How's it going?
From your nice, beautiful home, huh?
Yeah, see the redwood behind me?
I do.
Yeah.
Can't miss it if you look.
Nope, I do. Are you getting some cold weather up there right now, or what? No snow yet?
No, a few weeks ago we got a light dusting, but it's been in the 60s for a couple of weeks now. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
That won't
Very
last.
Doc, yeah, well. Yeah, I know. Uh-huh.
I remember some of the photos of your shoveling from last winter.
Yeah, 4 feet of snow is definitely in my future.
Well, you went from complete opposite spectrums of the world, man.
That's what I do, man. It's just what I do.
I love it. Nothing wrong with that, man. I'm envious. My goal is, when my daughter gets older, is to live remotely for 3 months every year. Just kind of go, live, see, experience.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Hey, Elmer's there. He just needs to unmute.
There he is.
Unmute.
Hi, Elmer.
There you go.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Elmer.
So Jeremy might be late because
he said that. Yeah, his truck broke down, huh?
Yeah.
Well, you got a Ford by any chance?
Could very well be. And Elmer, where's home for you? Where are you calling in from?
I'm in Metro Detroit.
Oh, okay, got it.
Sitting here staring at the snow falling.
Yeah, we were just talking about that with Alan. Nothing for him right at the moment.
Not yet.
Nope.
And we get it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So in California, well, not California, when I was living in Georgia, God forbid there was snow. Like, you go to the grocery store, there's no milk, no eggs, nothing. Even that's like they're shutting school just at the chance of snow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was in Austin when I lived there. I mean, if they even thought it might get cold enough to snow, they shut everything down.
Shut everything down, right? They're not. Yeah, they weren't prepped for it in Georgia.
No, absolutely not.
Not at all. right, so who else is scheduled to join us? Are we waiting on anybody else?
Angie was
Jeremy?
supposed to be.
We got
We got a bunch of people.
Carl and Angie. No, excuse me. Angie hadn't confirmed yet. Carl Hindle confirmed,
Okay.
and Brent Thesaurus declined.
Okay.
Steve
And
Weidman. Steve Weidman's going to be on, right?
Yeah, he said he was going to.
he hasn't confirmed, but I imagine he'll be here.
It's actually, we're a little early. We showed up early, so.
Well, no, it's 11:01 a.m.
And there's Steve.
There he is.
If you can hear us, Steve, check your lower left corner. You're muted.
How about now?
There-
Can you hear me?
Now we got you.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm driving today, so family day.
Where are you going to? Like going Knott's Berry Farm, Disney? What's the day look like?
There's no way you catch me at a theme park on a
Holiday.
holiday. Yeah. We're at, what is it, Glen? Oak Glen. I guess we're gonna
Okay.
go pick apples and go to Auntie Anne's and who knows.
Very cool, man.
Carl
Yeah.
just joined.
Carl, you're muted. Still muted, Carl. There you go.
Hey,
Hey
Hey,
there.
Hey, Carl.
there we go. So, is everybody ready?
Yes. Coffee over here.
Coffee.
I got some tequila if anybody wants some.
Nice. So I think so possibly Angie coming on board and then
Jeremy.
just Jeremy, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it would be nice if he could get here.
Right?
Considering it was his idea, right?
Yeah, what happened? Hey Jason, who won that Logan Paul thing? I haven't even
Oh, yeah. So the other guy, the guy KSI. So there's a funny story there. Steve and I have an ongoing joke because we both have young kids who are fans of Jake Paul, who's like an influencer, like a YouTube influencer. And so here I am, embarrassed, standing online at this Jake Paul event with my son, wearing an SEM Rush shirt, and two people behind me, a guy knocks on my shoulder and is like, "Hey, are you in the SEO industry?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm Steve Weiderman." I'm like, "Steve," I'm like, "we've been friends for so long and we've never met in person." And here we are meeting at the Jake Paul, like, freaking
yeah,
bash.
Jason goes, I'm never wearing an SEO sweatshirt to one of these events ever again.
Never again.
That was good though. So we had some fun. Did
That
you
was
did you
good.
get your selfie with Jake Paul? I don't remember.
Yeah, I did get it with my son. Yeah, my son got it. Yep. So,
Right.
yep.
Brian, if you look down your lower left, you're muted.
Jeremy, the guy that organizes it, has not arrived.
His truck broke down, Carl. He's he may be a little late.
I don't need people.
I'll buy it.
I don't need people.
Brian, we can't hear you still. You're still muted. Lower left of your Zoom screen should have the mic icon. Whoop, just lost Brian.
He's probably read. So what is this?
I don't know. I don't know if he's a veteran or if he's just joining to listen in.
I think just joining to listen in. I think it's like a public kind of a
Yeah.
link, right? Isn't it? So if we promoted it, there's going to be people that are hopping in and out, right?
And there's Angie. Hey, Angie.
Hey, Angie.
Hey guys.
Hi, Angie.
Whoop, whoop.
Welcome.
Doc, are you like logging in from Tatooine or what?
No, I'm logging in from my bedroom. That's just my my background. I
If
think
that was the Tatooine poster, I'd be blown away right now.
that looks a whole lot better than the real view.
Love it. Wait now. Carl, we've not met.
Hi, Angie.
So I feel like I'm in the Brady Bunch. You know?
It's true.
I'm on my phone, so I don't get to see the grid. Sorry.
You're on the road, right?
Yeah, I'm taking a day with the family. I just got back from Brazil at 6 a.m. this morning.
You are brave.
Yeah.
Brave in that you're still awake from trip and then ready to
Oh,
go.
are you kidding? It was an 11-hour flight. I think I slept 12 and a half hours of that. 10 and a half hours of that.
Well, that's impressive. I can't sleep that long on a flight, and I'm
There's
not.
Brian.
Testing.
We
Can you
got
hear
you,
me
Brian. We hear you.
That.
There you are, Brian.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Carl, it looks like there's an alien outside your window that's like spying in on this.
There is.
There it is.
Wait, is that
Evident.
one of those leg lamps? Is that
Yeah,
the leg
look at
lamp
that.
from the Christmas movie?
So I always saw was white behind there, so that was kind of creepy, actually.
It's a very bright alien.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just a lampshade.
All right, so Jeremy's still who knows where. Missing in action.
John AWOL from his own lineup.
He went AWOL.
He must be on an old army computer. We know how reliable those were.
He may be out of roadside park someplace having a little crayon snack. Hey, Carl?
Yeah.
Yeah. My little presence. Has
Oh,
been
hey, Alan.
waving all around the place.
There he is. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Brian.
Brian, you're down in like Garden Grove, right? Or Orange County?
What that?
Aren't you down in Orange County?
Yep.
Thought you were. We got to get together at some point. It's too
Yeah.
close for us not to go hang out.
Yeah, for sure. I know. So, hey, Bill. Hey, Carl. Doc.
The balloons have arrived. Finally.
Sorry.
You're muted
No.
there, Jeremy.
Podcaster.
Hey, Jeremy.
What a
you need-
tie. Good grief, dude.
It's Queen Marine.
Let's see, the officers
hey,
have arrived.
Jeremy,
Oh, hi, Bill.
I think Jeremy needs an Army tech specialist to help him unmute.
Ooh.
I remember the first time I used GoToMeeting or Zoom.
Bottom left corner to unmute, Jeremy.
All right. I can
There
hear
you
you guys. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, there
Yeah.
we go.
Beautiful.
Welcome and thanks for
good.
putting this together.
My pleasure. My pleasure. How's everybody doing?
Good.
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 Beautiful. Did we kick off already, or are we just kind of setting up?
We're just wrapping up.
No,
So.
we were all waiting for you. You're our lead. You're the go-to.
All right. So first of all, Doc, thanks for getting all the technical stuff sorted out while we were handling the chaos here.
No sweat, man.
You there, Doc?
Yeah.
Oh.
No sweat.
That duck.
There you go. All right. So do we have people on other than just us right now?
I think a couple guests.
Yeah, Brian.
Brian Harnish joined us. Yep.
All right. All right. So what we're going to do here today, guys, is I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we picked up from the military, how our experiences kind of helped to shape us, give us competitive advantages in the industry that we're in now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go around and kind of introduce each of the people here on the panel. Angie will give you first. And just kind of talk a little bit about
That's totally a
what's that?
gender norming thing. How did that happen?
Oh, it's a variety of reasons, that being one of them, I'm sure. And what we'll do is we'll just try and keep it kind of tight. I know we've got quite a few people on here today, so I don't want to run too short on time with that. So that being said, let's just go ahead and just jump into this. I know that we've all had different experiences in service. Angie, you want to go ahead and start with yours?
So the service background or jump to the lessons learned part?
Let's start with what you did in the military, what you learned there, and then kind of how it applies and whatever else you want to throw in there.
So I joined the U.S. Army Reserves in '96. It was in my third year of college. I was pre-med, planned to be a doctor. You know, we have these unique backstories for SEO. So I joined a combat support hospital and eventually became a head of patient administration, or NCOIC for military folks that get that, and served for 5 years. While I was at AIT, I actually ran a 5-mile run to sleep. I was at Lackland Air Force Base. And all my life, I knew that I had a problem with sleeping, and I was totally transparent in disclosing it, and everybody brushed it off, and I even saw a family doctor forever. But Lackland Air Force Base actually did a sleep study, which is what should be done in those crazy cases, and officially diagnosed me with having a textbook case of narcolepsy. But we know how well the government is at sharing paperwork, so the Air Force didn't actually send that paperwork accordingly to the Army for my immediate dismissal in that case. But I did pursue a medical discharge after 5 years when my unit was changing up and I was getting married, moved to a different state, and I wasn't prepared to be part of a different unit, because when you're deployed and lives matter and you need to manage a hospital like that, it was critical for me to know my team, and I was concerned about not knowing my team well enough in a deployment case with being in a different spot, and also the challenges of my narcolepsy being a factor there. So career change had to come up amidst of that. Working in a hospital, heat triggers my sleep episodes, so I had a good plan there, and I switched to computer programming and science, and eventually, you know, web development, e-business, SEO, conversion optimization. That's
very nice.
Journey to job.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about how the things that you picked up in the military ended up benefiting you in this world where things are constantly changing so fast all of the time.
Right, so there's lots of things, but to try to keep it short for our talk here, the thing that was standing out to me a lot this morning thinking about it was the team essence of everything, of really knowing your team, and basically you move forward with the team or not at all. And a critical aspect of that wasn't just knowing your team, their strengths, their weaknesses, their motivators, but also being able to manage change. I think change management is the most critical skill that I learned from that, because every time change is introduced, which is inevitable in military and the life, I guess, and of course in marketing and optimization, but if you're trying to lead in marketing and you're constantly introducing optimization, which is perpetual change, there's always friction there. And with being a platoon leader and then a section leader, that was a critical thing for me to always be able to evaluate of what are the critical pieces that I need to identify from my team. How do I recognize points of friction if I'm going to keep the team on target? What will keep them motivated? How do we fall back? So critical pieces, I think, that match up so close with marketing would be understanding how to set clear expectations with managing change so that people are aware of things and there aren't critical surprises that suddenly throw people off track or create the massive barriers. Managing expectations. I threw myself off there. But change management, of being able to understand how to set the expectations, and also to remember your training is a phrase that constantly kept coming up with Army stuff when people would panic or freak out, especially being in a hospital unit and people backing out of the, you know what you're doing, remember your training. So with trying to teach that to businesses and optimization teams, I try to evaluate how am I gonna set that out for a new team or a new business so that they're gonna be like, this is what we've learned if we get panicked or scared, what do we come back to? And these are the steps that we fall back on, so that, it's that fear aspect of your brain that makes decisions. So when it has to come back to your subconscious and you need to do something on autopilot, it has to be remember your training. So that's a critical piece of me doing optimization these days, of trying to see how do I fit that in there so that when they fall back or they're nervous about what we're about to implement, that they're going to fall back on this subconsciously to be like, this is our training. This is what we've learned.
That's a great point. And, we had a thing in the military where we talked about you don't rise to the situation, you fall to the level of your training. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize.
Right. Quotable.
Indeed. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good.
All right.
I got to get a photo of this Brady Bunch.
Alan, you want to go?
Yeah, if you want me to leave, I mean, I'll leave.
It's not the first time you've been asked, I'm sure.
No. And at least you asked, because there's been times where I wasn't even asked. I was just escorted
out the door.
Right. Job is
Oh,
yours.
God. Yeah. So I don't know. My story's pretty much out there already. I was a troublemaker growing up. Always looking to rebel, and didn't have any life direction until one day a friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm joining the Army. You want to hang out with me?"
Right.
Nice.
And he said we could be stationed together wherever we want in the world. And I was like, yeah, what the hell? I got no direction in my life. I got no purpose. I'll at least hang out at the recruiters, right? So we went to the recruiters, and the guy showed me a bunch of videos of different MOSs. And when he got to the military police, I saw a badge and a gun and somebody who told people with a higher rank what to do. So I was like, I'm in. Because that was really appealing to me at the time. And I joined.
Nice.
Now, the reality is I wasn't street smart at that time. It turned out that my buddy who said, we could be stationed anywhere we want, at the same place, he was full of crap. He got me, he hoodwinked me, because the recruiter said, if you can get somebody else to join, well, you'll get an instant promotion the day we sign you in.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that recruiters lie?
No. So the recruiter didn't tell me anything. The recruiter told him, and then he told me.
All right.
The good news is, from a long-term sustainable perspective, I think I won out, because he spent 10 years in jail, my buddy, for some really violent crimes. And so I feel like I got back at him because life worked out, But so I joined, and I really enjoyed it. The fact that for the first time in my entire life I had discipline and structure was a big deal. There was a program and a process to get people to be successful at what they were responsible for doing. And there was a lot of hard work, right? So I wasn't an athlete in school. Yeah, I was a swimmer growing up. I mean, I was a really good swimmer growing up, but I had no upper body strength going into this thing. I couldn't do 5 push-ups, let alone pull-ups or anything else, and that was really difficult. The academic parts of it was just, I was like a fish in water with that. The military tactics in just general combat, and then later on in advanced training when it came to military police, the law enforcement stuff, I ate that stuff up. And by the time I got out of advanced training, I was doing 50 push-ups on chairs, right? So this was this scrawny kid that became transformed through this whole process. And that gave me a whole new experience in how to show up for life and what it meant to participate with others to achieve a goal, and where I had my own level of responsibility in what I did in that experience. after I got out of the Army, I stumbled around again. I had lost my direction. I had lost that structure. I had lost the discipline. And it took many years after that. But eventually I found myself involved with computers in an office management role. So I learned office management and what it meant to run an organization and a business from that perspective. And marketing was a big thing. I did a lot of work in marketing. And this was before the internet. I was born in '59, so the internet wasn't the thing, right? When I was growing up or when I was a young adult. And yeah, one thing happened after another where I just kept showing up in life. At that point in the mid '90s, I had reverted back to what I learned in the Army about just showing up and doing what's in front of you and not getting too far ahead of yourself. And trusting your training and your knowledge that got you this far, right? So one thing led to another, and next thing you know, I was building a website in 1995, and that launched my internet career. It wasn't until 2000 when SEO came into my life, but when it did, all of the things I learned up until that point in all the different work jobs that I had had, including in the military, just kind of melded together for me, right? And I've said this a number of times in other interviews and in the past about my experience in the military. I was in the Army. I was in the crime prevention in the military police, and I did investigative work while I was in that role. So investigative curiosity was baked into me, and that paid off big time with SEO, right? That's why I'm really able to say that I've been doing SEO for all these years, coming on 20 years, at the level of success that I've gotten year after year, more and more success. It's required more and more investigative work. It's required more and more critical thinking that I was taught in the Army. Before the Army, I didn't have critical thinking. I was just like clueless, right? And the military taught me critical thinking because it's life or death, right? So, that's what got me this far. That's what's gotten me here. And I'm just really honored to be able to say I'm a veteran and to have such a tight-knit community, not just in marketing and not just in SEO, as good as that is, but within that community, the veterans community in our industry, right? And Jeremy, especially to you, thank you. The work that you do to help others succeed in general, and specifically where it applies to veterans, dude, you're an amazing human being, and
Thank you.
just really grateful. So there you go.
I appreciate that. You touched on the community, and that is something that I've noticed. I'm sure we've all bounced around a little bit from industry to industry to some degree prior to kind of setting home here. But what I've noticed about the SEO community is that there's no other industry I've ever seen that is as tight-knit as this is. I mean, when somebody has a problem, everybody bands together and helps each other. Very similar to the way that veterans do. So that's definitely something that I found really cool about this industry. Sounds like your audio went out, Alan.
We have that common thread, and it's something we were taught and we were trained in to show up that way, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's even deeper to me because of the fact that it's about the Constitution of the United States and our willingness to put our lives on the line. And the fact that we know so many have sacrificed so much more than us, that I think we have a level of gratitude and appreciation for the continued life that we live. All of that goes into it.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good.
All right. Jason, how about you?
Ah, well, thank you, Alan. That's a hard story to kind of follow. So my story is probably similar. You know, like, we all started in the recruiting office. Alan and I probably have a little bit in common in that we were both on Long Island when we went to the recruiter's office. So grew up in New York, Long Island. I was, unlike Alan, I was an athlete. I was a big wrestler, played a lot of baseball. When I was 7 years old, you couldn't tell me I was not going to be a professional baseball player. People would say, "What do you want to be when you get older?" I'd be like, "What do you mean? Like, I'm going to be a baseball player, of course, right?" Just like every other little kid that played baseball. And so that didn't work out. I really didn't apply myself in high school. My mind just wandered, right? I was bored in school.
So let me interrupt you real quick. Can I get
Yeah.
a show of hands? Who else had that same problem here? Everybody, I imagine.
Well, I slept through high school. Narcolepsy.
Yeah, you know, it's the truth. And so you know, my mind was racing. I was bored of some of the subjects in school. I was more focused about my wrestling match that night, and you know, and I just got by, you know, B's and C's. I once tried to convince my mom in grade school that F meant fantastic, and she wasn't buying it. And so yeah, I was always trying to like play the angles. And so you know, needless to say, I didn't get scholarships to like Ivy League schools out of high school. And so I wanted to get out of Long Island and grow up and become a man. And I took the ASVAB test, and after I took the test, they're like, "All right, well, you scored enough to get into all of the branches. Which would you like to choose?" And I'm like, and so I chose the Air Force. And you know, a couple months later, you know, I was flying out to Lackland, right, Angie, where you were, right? Yep. So I spent whatever the 6 weeks, or you know, that's where we get, because I know military Marine Corps is much longer than the Air Force, right? That's like one of those things, right? So I did my whatever 6 weeks in Lackland. And believe it or not, because I was in such great shape and I was a wrestler, you know, I ended up making special forces in the Air Force. And so, you know, they called my mom and they're like, "Hey, you have a real Rambo on your hand here." He was one of, you know, only troops in months that have made the special forces, and it's an honor. And you know, and so I got on the phone with my mom. I'm like, "Mom," I'm like, "I didn't join the Air Force to be jumping out of planes and stuff." I'm like, "I just wanted to go to college." I'm like, "I don't know if I'm going to accept it," you know. And so I ended up turning down special forces. And so I got stationed. I did my boot camp. I had my vocational school at Lackland. So everybody was going off, and I stayed in Lackland, and I worked in logistics. It was called supply, I guess, at the time. And I got my first station was in Las Vegas. And so I spent some time in Las Vegas as an airman. It was an amazing experience. It was the home of the Thunderbirds, right? So that was our whole mission, was to support the Thunderbirds. So I'd wake up from my dorm room and I'd go outside, and there's an air show happening every single day. And that was an amazing experience. And then I worked the system. You know, I was optimizing the system, and so while everybody else is getting orders to go to, you know, Korea or Saudi Arabia, you know, I was like applying online, trying to find better, you know, remote opportunities. And so my colonel pulled me into the office. He's like, "Jason," he goes, "Do you know somebody at the Pentagon or something?" And I'm like, "No." They're like, "Yeah, so everybody else is going to Korea, and you got orders to do a TDY in Italy. And I want to know, how the heck did you pull that off?" And so it's easy. I'm like, I just went on, I applied. He's like, "You can't do that, man. You got to get like," and so, well, now the orders are in, so you're going to Italy. So I got to live in Italy for 6 months on a TDY, and then I came back. And then, you know, it was one of those things, you know, like I was always entrepreneurial, money motivated. And you know, while the Air Force turned me from a boy into a man very quickly, right after the first couple weeks in you know, boot camp, you know, I didn't want to have to pay my time, you know, 20 years before I can, advance to the highest ranks. I wanted to, just move faster, and that wasn't an option. And so after 4 years came around, I just figured that it wasn't, for me. I was always an entrepreneur, and I took the experience, and I ended up getting out after 4 years, and I stayed in Vegas and became an entrepreneur at that time. And similar to Alan, I accidentally stumbled upon SEO around 2001, back in the Overture days. I found Overture, and I'm like, what is this? You're telling me that you can pay 2 cents to be on the top of the search engine and nobody else knew about this? I'm like, this is awesome. And so I'm like, I'm all in. And so I was going to school at UNLV at the time. I was a mobile DJ, DJing weddings and stuff on the weekends. I had a radio show in Vegas. And so at that point, I found Aaron Wall's SEO book. I still have it here. And so that was one of the first books that I read from front to back twice. And then after that, I just started reading everything that I could, following most of you guys here on the thread back in those days too, with some of your early writings. And so here it is 20 years later, and it's been an amazing journey. It's been fun. So.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yep.
Let's see. I can't see all the people on here, but Wiedemann's on here somewhere. You want to roll next, Steve?
Sure, I'd be happy to go. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Yeah, thanks for bearing with me during that drive up here. So,
yeah.
The family's all out over here. So yeah, I was what, 94?
Does the no camera mean that you're not wearing pants again?
Am I no camera? Here, let me see. How about now? Can you see me now?
There you are.
There we go.
Yes.
All right.
Cool. This whole time I thought I was on camera. Go figure. So yeah, I'm on my phone. So apologize for the the car background over here. So yeah, I was 94, and
that looks like a really luxury track vehicle.
No, it's just an Armada. just a family vehicle. She wanted to get something that wasn't a minivan, and said, all right, well, Armada's the way to go.
I'm a little disappointed you didn't get a Bradley.
That's what I used to drive, unmechanized.
I know.
Yeah, so I don't think you can get one street legal, can you? I didn't get a Humvee.
There's only one way to find out.
I drove for the adjutant at 122 Infantry, so it always is a tease when I see a Humvee. I'm like, but yeah, I don't want to deal with the maintenance. I don't have a motor pool in my garage, so forget it. So yeah, 94. All my relatives were getting these great jobs. My cousins were doctor and actor, and I wasn't that smart and I wasn't that talented, and I was the only cousin that hadn't done. Well, actually, none of my cousins had joined the military, and my grandfather, who was retired Navy, just always seemed disappointed. So I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna go do something to make him proud. But I'm not much for cold weather, and I'm not much of a swimmer. So I walked into the recruiter's office and I said, hey, I got some pretty good grades. I'm a smart kid. I'm in great shape. Put me somewhere good. And he's like, I'm going to put you at 11 X-ray. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. No, that wasn't good. That was infantry. It ended up being 11 Bravo and 11 mechanized, and I was a Bradley driver. So that was circa 94. I got to be part of something called Task Force 21, and we worked on laptops, and we're firing javelins over hills using cameras on Kevlars and some really cool tech.
Nice.
Still a little bit ahead of its time back then, but it did help me kind of develop a passion for computing and computers. And soon I was playing with the internet on my free time. And when I when I got back after I did my, I think it was 3 years, 3 months, or whatever the minimum was back then. The first sergeant's like, hey, if you re-enlist, I'll send you to school and you can be a corporate. And I said, First Sergeant, what I've learned in the last couple months on my own time, I'm going to make more than you do in a year from now. So it's like good luck with that. So a year later, I'm at IBM, and I am at that point making more than what he was. And, I never did get a response back from the letter I sent him showing him what my paycheck looked like. But it was one of those moments where I was like, I really was glad that I did my time and that I got the experience, but I was also really glad that, I chose something I had a lot more passion for, which, was the internet, which was Usenet and Gopher servers and all that cool stuff we were doing in the early days of web. With that though, like with what Alan said, when you start building websites, you have to at some point figure out that there's no traffic going to them, and you have to learn. You have to learn how to get traffic if you want to retain your website clients, and that's what I did: website promotion, internet marketing. And one day somebody called it SEO. Like Jason said, there's the Aaron Walls and the Bruce Clays and the pioneers that we were following back in the late 90s, early 2000s that really led the way for us to to evolve into the kind of the marketers that we are in this community. So that was pretty amazing. I think lessons learned. I went in, as I mentioned, already pretty in shape. I was a know-it-all, smart ass kid. I had pretty good discipline already. So what I learned a little bit of apathy. I think I learned when to care and when not to care. So, when I'm at IBM, the boss comes down and says, "Hey guys, there's a big mess in the corner. I need somebody to clean it up." Everybody's like, "That's not my job." I'm like, "Where's the mop?" So I think I learned the
Nice.
ability to just say, just do your job. It doesn't matter what it is. You're getting paid to do something. Just shut up and do your job and don't complain. I think a lot of people don't evolve in business and in their careers because they're not willing to take on more than their responsibility. They just say, "This is my bubble. I'm going to live in it and sit here until they fire me." And you can't do that. And like what Angie said, I think the ability to adapt to change is probably the most important thing that we all take away from the military is that, in any given moment, everything's going to change, and you can either respond to it, adapt, and and tell everybody, "Follow me," and lead the way, or you can be a complainer or a sheep or panic. And I think the ability to adapt and to think critically about what do I do in this situation, other than run away or pawn it off on somebody else or blame somebody, really helps develop character. So I would say that's probably one of the main things I got out of the military was the ability to adapt. And I think that played a huge role in where I am today.
That's a great point. In our world, our old world, people died if shit didn't get done. So it's definitely, we have a different perspective of that, I think, than the average person. So that's a great point.
So that's my story.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, man. Doc, you want to roll next? Sheldon, can you hear us?
Yeah, there. I couldn't get it to unmute.
There we go.
Yeah,
Miami Vice.
I like a lot of us. I think I was one of those rebellious kids. I didn't pay any attention to school. I was doing what I had to do and no more. Occasionally less. I finished up high school in California, and in California at the time you had to have 240 credits throughout your 4 years of high school in order to graduate. And I was not going to graduate by the end of my senior year, my junior year. I wasn't going to make the 240 because I'd screwed off so much. And I got tied up with a physics teacher. His name was Robin Boys. He was a retired rear admiral. And he jerked me up by the short hairs and straightened me out and got me focused and motivated. And I finished my senior year with 360 credits because I took every advanced science and math course they had. Fell in love with it. And he just turned me around 100%. But one of the lessons that both he and my dad taught me is that everything that you say and do, or that you don't say or don't do, has a consequence. And I managed to get that lesson learned before I was faced with the inevitability of Vietnam. And that's when, about the time during my senior year, they came back with the lottery instead of the draft. And my lucky number was 13. So that pretty much sealed my destination. And I decided, okay, if I'm going to go to Nam, I'm going to go on my terms, not theirs. I'm not going to go be a grunt on the front lines. So I decided to follow my dad's example. He'd been in the Navy. He was a Navy corpsman in World War II in Korea. And I joined the Navy. But I went down to see the recruiter and I said, okay, what are my options? He says, well, we've got this, this advanced electronics program, which interested me a little bit, but I was going to be locked up down in a third level basement someplace. That didn't appeal to me. The other was the nuclear power program. Well, nuclear power program is where all the subs were. So yeah, submarine duty, best chow to be had. That looked pretty good to me. So I volunteered for subs, and that meant that instead of a 4-year enlistment, I had to do a 6-year enlistment. And I went ahead and went for it. And when I got out of boot camp and A school, then they started screening for subs. Found out I was, because I did an awful lot of shooting in my youth, I was 75% deaf in the left and 95% deaf in the right ear, from in the high range, which would be stuff like sonar and radio, and so I was unqualified for sub duty. And I said, okay, well then scratch that extra 2 years. No, that's not the way it works. You're still going to be around for 6 years. What we're going to make it easy for. We're going to make it a 4-year enlistment and a 2-year extension, which is already enacted. But I wasn't real sure what the difference there was, so I kind of entered into that with a sour attitude. I felt like I got screwed over. And they sent me out to one of the fast, sleek, ocean-going fleet tugs that could do about 10 knots with a tailwind, that had been around since pre-World War II. But on top of that, it was electric propulsion, diesel electric. So I got to, as an electrician's mate, I got to learn a lot about my rate, but it wasn't exactly a motivating experience. I met the XO of the boat, lieutenant commander, who we got to build a pretty good rapport. And like my physics teacher in high school, he kind of jerked me up and got my attention, turned me around a little bit, put me in a position of leadership. I was running the E-gang down in the auxiliary engine, which is all the ship service generators and whatnot for the communication and mine sweeping and everything else. And that kind of turned me around. So I made the decision just before I rotated off of that fleet tug, I made the decision I was going to go ahead and follow my dad's example and go career Navy. And so I cleaned up my act, started taking some, showing some initiative and going for the next advancement rate, presenting my exams and all. And sooner or later, I managed to get my act together enough that I got some attention. I was working at a place in San Diego that I'm not going to name, that we're attached to special warfare community. And I got an opportunity to go to Nam again for a second tour. I said, well, if I was going to go to Nam for a second tour, I wanted to go with the guys that I knew were going to come back. But I had worked with the SEAL Team 1 as part of their support crew on a couple of occasions in Nam. And so I decided I wanted to join the SEALs. And they have what they call Hell Week in their basic screening training. And it's very aptly named. 1,300 guys will go in, maybe 112 will come out alive, as far as not being disqualified. I was in the larger portion of that group. I couldn't cut it. Flat could not cut it. I mean, it was brutal. And there were guys that were awesome, major young athletes in awesome condition that were sit down and do 100 push-ups nonstop, no sets whatsoever, 50 pull-ups for Christ's sake. These guys were Schwarzenegger strikers, and they washed out too, because a lot of it is psychological. It's not all just physical. There's a lot of psychological to it. Anyway, I washed out.
Sure. So
I got an opportunity to go to MST, which is a mobile support team for the SEALs, which basically we were the communications and logistics backup. We were the boat drivers that inserted and extracted them in their operations. And we got the pleasure, nine times out of 10, we got the pleasure of not being shot at in the process. So the best of both worlds, right? And I got to work with those guys quite a bit, and I loved it. And that just cemented my desire to go career. But I was in the Brown Water Navy now, and that's where I wanted to stay. And unfortunately, in the Navy, they allow you to do a certain number of years of what's qualified as sea duty, and then before you can go to shore duty. And I waived my first opportunity to go to shore duty because I wanted to stay where I was. And I called my detailer, who's the guy in Washington, D.C., to decide where every individual is going to go next. And he was out sick, and somebody else in his division was covering his desk. And this guy was just a dick and a half. And during the conversation where I just said, you know what, this conversation is going nowhere. I'll wait till Franklin gets better and I'll call him. He says, no, we're going to make a decision right now. He said, you got those two choices. He gave me a couple of choices that were outlandish. I wasn't interested in either of them. There was it was technically shore duty, but it was, ostensibly shore duty. It was on an island, but it was qualified as sea duty. It was in Adak, Alaska. And you got to really piss somebody off to get forced to go to Adak, Alaska. Questioning their heritage will do it. I can tell you from personal experience. So we sold the cars and furniture and everything else, and my wife and kids went to where her folks lived, and I was going to Adak, Alaska unaccompanied for 15 months. So I got back on the horn. I was already detached and on leave en route, and I got back on the horn, and Franklin was back, and I got him to undo it, and he sent me to Dam Neck, Virginia, which I had never heard of. It's south of Norfolk, for a brand new construction facility out there. It was a temporary assignment as public works officer. And I got there. I was an E6. And this is a pre-commissioning crew. The CO had been selected but had not yet been formally named. And I was the first guy to show up. And I met this guy, Captain Paul Riskanich. Everybody called him Scratch. Guy was salt of the earth. Came into his office. He'd been up in the Pentagon for a few years. And I went into his office, and he sat me down and offered me a beer out of his desk side refrigerator. I said, no, thank you, sir, But I said, okay, I'm going to like this guy, I can tell. And he set me to my task and basically gave me carte blanche and told me what had to happen, make it happen. You decide. If you got any questions, call. But this is what has to be done, and this one it has to be done. And basically, I had the facility. They had just broken ground. It was going to be 3 basement levels and 2 above ground levels, and it was for the undersea warfare group. They monitor and track submarines, and they'd have all these cables laid out across the ocean floor, and they can tell you what sub is where and how fast it's going in what direction. And I had to order everything: generators, desks, blackboards, radio equipment, racks for the computer floor, the whole thing. And that was my first task, just to get all this stuff on order and track the deliveries. That took me about 8 months to do. And I learned to do some Fortran and some COBOL and got into all kinds of stuff that I couldn't even spell before. and worked with some fantastic people. And Scratch ended up recommending I go LDO. And he wrote me up a recommendation for a limited duty officer, which is basically like a field promotion to commission. And that went up. And I got selected on the first round. I made the first cut. And about that time, I got contacted by the facility was built. We had already gone through the commissioning. It was operational at about a 50% level. They were just phasing in the other facilities into its operation. And I got a call from a headhunter in Dallas. I never did find out exactly how she got my name and contact deets, but she contacted me, and a company was looking for a field service manager for a 5-state region. That was basically what I was basically acting as a public works officer, facilities manager, whatever, and I was a good candidate. And I said, yeah, I'm career Navy, and I'm only about halfway. I had, just coming up on 11-year mark. I said, yeah, I don't understand. She never would answer me. How did she got my contact? So somebody must have given it to her. She just didn't want to say. But I said, I'm really not in the market. Well, at the time, I had just done my annual taxes, and my federal income tax was based on about a $13,000 annual income. And she said the salary range was 90 to 105. I said, so where do I have to go? And she says, well, you can office, it's up to you. You can office in Dallas or Houston or Oklahoma City. And I said, Dallas sounds good. So I flew out to Atlanta and interviewed with the company and got a job offer and told Scratch I was getting out of the Navy. And I don't know that I lost the friendship, but it certainly lost a lot of momentum. He was very disappointed. But from 13,000, and they offered us 90 was a start, right at the very bottom of the range. And you know what? I didn't cry myself to sleep that night at all. So, long story short, a little late for that. I learned a lot about me. I grew up in the military, like I think most of us probably did. I learned a lot about having more in me than I thought I did. Working with special warfare, I learned about teamwork. Our approach was a little bit beyond do your job. That was certainly always paramount. But it was also more of a do what needs to be done. Like you said, saying where's the mop? Yeah, if the place is a dump, everybody pitches in. If somebody gets hit in combat, somebody's got to pick up the slack. So you got to know how to do everybody's job. You got to be willing to do everybody's job. Sometimes it's just to help them. Sometimes it's to replace them. Sometimes it's just to give them a break. And that's the kind of thing that I really carried over. That working in SEO, in digital community, you do what's got to be done. And I've always been very customer oriented. That if they're paying me to do a job for them, then by God, they deserve to expect the job to be done to the best of my ability. And if I don't feel I'm capable of doing it as well as it needs to be done, it's time for me to pick up my Rolodex and find somebody that I know that I have confidence in that's better at that aspect of it. I think a lot of folks these days, they try to offer everything, and there's just too much involved anymore. 20 years ago, yeah, you could be a jack of all trades in digital, but there's too many new things in it. You can't be proficient anymore at all of it. So, I like to work with teams. I've got a few guys that I work with regularly that they do. Like, for instance, I will not touch PPC. Steve Garanxer is my go-to on that. He's a wizard. I trust him implicitly. I know that he's going to get the best possible results. And it keeps me from having to do something that I absolutely detest. So, when I get a job that's got some organic and some PPC, hey, Steve, pick up on 6, It's just been the natural progression for me.
Nice.
I would not be as effective in what I do if I had not done that time in the military the way that I did it. Even though I didn't do it as well as I should have, I came out of it a whole lot better for it.
That's a great perspective, Doc. Bill, let's put you up next.
So I think was sort of the oddball out. I had everything going for me. Graduated #1 in my high school class, accepted to Harvard. Then got the word that my parents, my stepfather, spent the money on a farm rather than allowing me to go to school. So I figured, what's the best way I can piss everybody off? And it was to join the Marine Corps. So I did, and it was, I think, in retrospect, probably the best thing for me at the time. I mean, granted, I could made a great living having gone to Harvard and then Harvard Law, but yeah, I think at the time it was good. I ended up in a fast company, which, you're basically put in a remote place and you augment base security. I was part of a security detachment for President Reagan and a couple other very senior people when they came to Japan. I was primarily based in Asia Pacific. So went all around and then ended up getting hurt. And while I was recovering, I was put in an office, and being the resident knuckle dragger, they didn't think that I was capable of doing anything with intelligent thought. So they didn't have nothing for me to do, but there was these boxes in the corner. I unboxed them, realized there were these things called computers. Having the ability to read, I actually read the manuals and set this up and put in a bunch of systems. And then I learned about this really cool thing that if you submit ideas to the Marine Corps and they get accepted and they save money, you get a nice check. So that was my my sort of payroll enhancement program, was coming up with all these cool ways to use automation. Then once I was healed, I realized, well, I can go to school. I'm in an AC, air-conditioned office, and I get to play with these cool toys. So I didn't go back to the other side until a couple years later when I did some time in Memphis. They said to reward me, sort of like, Doc, you know, you said you once you spend so much time in a deployed unit, you have to be in a friendly area for a while. So they sent me to Memphis, and I was at the MEPS. I gave the ASVAB test. So one of two Marines, and I was a pretty intense Marine, and then I had to learn how to deal with those problem children that didn't want to be there. And we even tested at the prisons. That's how big we were to get numbers. So we'd go to a prison and give the ASVAB test to prisoners. And then I think that taught me how to deal with non-military people. And I think, you know, as we look at some of the skills, that was a big one. So going there and meeting with administrators and dealing with students. So we left Memphis and went to California, where they decided, hey, you're infantry, we're going to put you back in the infantry. And this time you're going to be our admin officer, because we don't have one. And about 6 weeks, 8 weeks after we got to California, we deployed to the Gulf, where we were there long after everybody came back, got the parades. We were on ship, stopped in the Philippines, and then, because we had a specialty in counterterrorism, pulled us off the boat and kept us there for another 8 months, protecting the base and chasing down a bunch of bad guys in the jungle. So that's when I realized that I had a choice. After 10 years in the Marine Corps, I really enjoyed it. I sort of excelled at it, despite being sort of a reasonably intelligent person as an enlisted person. Those typically don't go well. They encourage you to become an officer, but sort of prevent you from doing the things you need to do it. So I decided to get out. You know, it was either choose the family or choose the Marine Corps. It was a good choice in the end, because about 40 days after we got back, after being gone 18 months, the unit deployed to Somalia for another 9 months. So in the big picture, I think it was good that I got out. And like Doc said, you know, being presented with opportunities to make significantly more money than what I was doing. Like him, I was given a job, my first job after interviewing probably with 300 people. The biggest mistake I made was basically on my resume, I thought it made sense to say that, you know, I was at this level job and I was managing this much money and this many people. And many of the companies I was applying to, that was more than what the CEO was managing. So I didn't quite realize that, hey, you can't do more than what the guy that's hiring you for a mid-level job. Long story short, we had the riots in LA. I had a bug out bag. My CEO at the time said, you know, I want everybody to have one of these. That then prompted me to build a disaster preparedness company. And then we started selling them to Japan. Having lived in Japan, experienced many earthquakes in Japan, my wife being Japanese, we were marketing them online in this thing called NiftyServe, which was sort of like an early version of AOL, long before we even had AOL. And then the Kobe earthquake hit, and we did about $20 million worth of business. It made the front page of the LA Times and a couple business publications that this guy had used this thing called the internet to crack the Japanese market. So next thing you know, phone's ringing off the hook. It's all these people from sort of the Bay Area, combination of reading that article, wanting to crack Japan, and this cool new site called Yahoo. People were calling saying, hey, you know, I want to talk to you about this. So here I'm thinking they wanted these disaster kits, but in reality, they wanted to know about this thing called the internet, how we were marketing specifically to Japan in Japanese, using search and that. And then I became sort of cozy with Jerry Yang and realized that we could submit people to Yahoo. And then he was giving us a break. All we had to do is put our email address in parentheses. I think some of you know this story. Some bonehead went to the first search conference and said, hey, this is a cool tip, that everybody started using it so we could no longer get a 24-hour advantage to get people in. Basically sold that company to another company that was trying to do more sort of global search. That then became Outrider. We grew Outrider to about an 850 person company, sold it to WPP. And then I couldn't deal with bureaucracy, so left and created another global strategy company around search. And then we sold that to Ogilvy in 2006. And then tried to retire and then got sucked back into search. The things that I think for me that I brought from the military that have helped me the most, especially on the SEO side, is this focus on basics. So as Angie said, always trust your training. You know, the reason you do so many things with so much repetition is they become, you know, muscle memory. You know, everything from drawing your weapon from a holster, which I know they just brutally train MPs and stuff, because you got to have that muscle memory to do that. It's the same thing we have in search. I think along with that, I was trying to explain to somebody recently why, you know, they saw some movie and saw the almost brutality of inspections and things that people, they're checking everything from, you know, Irish pennants to lint to how, you know, smudges, and said, why do they do that? And said, because so much of what we do is attention to detail. And Jeremy, as you said, you know, when we don't pay attention, people die. Little things like I had a scenario once we were entering a building and recovering an embassy, and one of the guys totally forgot to push the forward assist to make sure the round was seated. And then you come into a room and you got a couple of hostiles and you hear his misfire because he didn't seat the round. You know, something you're taught this thousands and thousands and thousands of times. He failed to do one time, and you know, it nearly cost somebody their life. So we don't have those kind of scenarios now, but it can cost somebody their business. So that's probably number one, is focus on the basics and attention to detail. Probably the second one, this idea of teams and empowerment. You know, having been part of small teams the whole time I was in the military, we did almost everything as 2 and 4 and 8-man teams. You know, you count on the person to your left and to your right, and until the first time you get shot at or it becomes real, you actually don't know how those people are going to respond. You know, you get a guy, you think that they're probably going to be the next sort of Rambo or get a Medal of Honor, and then, you know, they're the first person crying for mommy when you come out of the helo. And then you got the scrawny little person who you think is, that's who they're going to be. They're the ones that turn up being the ultimate, you know, sort of wingman, if you will. And then another big thing I found is empower people by giving them. One of the things the Marine Corps did for me is a lot of my senior officers, sort of, even though I was, you know, an enlisted, often gave me a lot of responsibility. Like when I actually got out, I was a staff sergeant, but I was in a major's billet. So that's almost unheard of, but they felt that I could do the job, so they put me in the job. And so I learned a big lesson that if you have a screw up, oftentimes the best thing you can do is give them responsibility. And then that empowers them to rise to the challenge. And then lastly, I think the one that's both a dual-edged sword for me personally is mission completion. You know, as a Marine, you're taught to never stop, you know, to keep going while you can continue. And that's good and bad. You're going to work hard for the client and do a good job, but, you know, often, for me at least, that's at the expense of myself, either sleep or exercise or things like that. So it's good that we have that we'll charge on and continue to do it until we're done. But yeah, you've got to take that time. So in the end, you know, I spent 10 years. I think it's pretty invaluable. I got an amazing wife out of the deal. And some great experience and some great friends that I have still today. You know, in addition to, you know, that's the cool thing about this industry. And I've had the same thing. I've told people about our camaraderie, where you can sort of phone a friend or email somebody and they'll do their best to help you out, even though you may be in some cases pitching the same project. But we have that, and that's a teamwork that I think does come directly from the military, even with people that haven't been. In this group here especially, I think is even tighter than that, and that's why I really appreciate, Jeremy, you doing this and getting us together. And same thing, I've tried to do more for veterans and especially for Marine veterans, trying to help them get jobs and things. And so I think, if each of us can do that and continue what you've started, we'll all be the better for it.
That's an awesome
Bill,
story, Bill.
I'd say, Bill, I'd be willing to guess that you probably also got how to document and train others, because I can tell you your books are amazing. And, when my managers at companies as big as Disney are saying, you got to read Bill's book, you've got something. So I've appreciated everything I've learned from you. And I'm sure some of that training ability and documentation was derived from the discipline you got from the service.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. We had this thing, we used to call it the Book of Knowledge, and you documented the process, and you had to know everything 3 levels below and everything, every level below you, 3 levels above and everything below. And yeah, we called it the Book of Knowledge. And yeah, that's what it ended up being. It was basically our training manual from IBM. We
great.
converted it into that book. So glad people got some use out of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's awesome. I didn't know you had any books out, Bill. When you get a second, shoot me links and I'll drop them in the description on YouTube when we throw this up as well.
Great. We'll do.
Cool. All right. Let's see. I know we've got Carl and Elmer still up. Let's go ahead and roll with Elmer.
All right, well, thanks. I have really enjoyed listening to everybody's story, and I can identify with them in different ways. There's always different things that we have in common. Interesting mentioning the Thunderbirds. My brother was crew chief for the Blue Angels for a couple of tours.
Nice.
That's
Wow.
a heck of an honor for him.
Sure.
I like many of you, I joined the Army because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I was working for the Kmart Corporation in the 80s, which at the time was the retail group to be associated with, and kind of
I got all my clothes from Kmart as a kid, so I'm with you.
Yeah, I was a stockroom manager coming out of high school. I was going to college at night, and I realized it just was not the thing that I wanted to do. So I went to the recruiter and I said, hey, I want to be a helicopter pilot. It's like, all right, I was the first guy that he'd ever recruited. So he had no idea what he was doing. I mean, I don't even think he had been taught to lie yet. He was that new. And I went in there and he's like, okay, well, if you want to be looking it up in a book, it's all right. Well, if you want to be a helicopter pilot, you have to take a flight physical. So he sends me to the MET station to take a flight physical. And I walk in and guy behind the desk is, so you want a flight physical, Class A or Class C? And I said, well, I don't know, whichever one you need to be a pilot. He says, let me see your glasses, right? So I hand them to him and he says, all right, you flunk. So what are you talking about? Well, you have to have 20/20 vision to be pilot. I'm like, oh, crap. So I said, well, never mind then. So I go back, recruiter sits me down. He says, you can make a lot of money if you be a tank driver. I said, well, that just doesn't sound like something I want to do. So I think he showed me the same video that Alan mentioned. He's all these things going on, and I see these guys in a classroom learning to speak a foreign language. And that's what I want to do right there. He's like, all right. So he goes and looks it up. He's like, and his eyes got really big. He's like, whoa, I get a huge bonus if I recruit somebody to go to language school. So, all right, let's figure this out. And so he sent me to the MEP station to take the D-Lab, the Defense Language Aptitude Battery, and I passed that, passed my ASVAB, and passed everything else. And so I went to the Defense Language Institute and spent 47 weeks there learning to speak Czech, because I wanted German. It was full. I wanted Polish, and it was full. I said, well, I want to get stationed in Germany. What language can I take? Well, Czechoslovakia is in Germany, next to Germany, so there you go. Wow, that was the most grueling academic experience I'd ever had. I was, I just coasted through high school, coasted through, what little college I went through, but that school was tough. And I got to tell you, it's got a 50% washout rate, and I know why, because thankfully I ended up on the 50% that made it through. It was kind of dicey a couple of times. There was one Air Force NCO in particular who saw that I was struggling, and he sat me down in his office, and we had this conversation, and I didn't even realize till we were done. We were having the entire conversation in the language. And he says, well, you know this stuff. Why are you not doing well? I said, I don't know. I just keep not making the tests. And he gave me some tips that ended up being very helpful. And I ended up getting through the rest of it with flying colors. Didn't go to Germany, though. I ended up in Fort Bliss, Texas, which is in El Paso, in the 3rd Cavalry. What an interesting place that was. But I had met some wonderful people there, some great folks, people that I'm still friends with today. After that, I ended up in Germany. I ended up spending a total of 6 years in Germany. Didn't really, I mean, was here and there, did some cool stuff, went to Desert Storm. I was on a helicopter crew, which was really fun. But I think a couple of things that happened to me after the Cold War ended and after Desert Storm that really kind of were very special for me. I got to go to the Czech Republic after they decided they wanted to join NATO, and I got to go and be a translator for the first unit-to-unit exchange. So, it's not life or death, but I tell you, when you're standing there and those people are relying on you to be able to communicate, that's tough. That was really challenging. Thankfully, the Czech folks had a lady on their end who spoke English better than I spoke Czech, so she was able to help quite a bit. But that was a unique honor to be able to do something like that. And then just towards the end of my last tour in Germany, I ended up spending 6 weeks there in the Czech Republic. I was part of a group that was going there to help them celebrate the 50th anniversary of the liberation from Nazis. And so I was going around from town to town, touring all through the Czech Republic, and mostly translating for a doctor who, the one time we had to translate with other medical people, he didn't even need me because they sat there and spoke Latin and Greek to each other, and they were perfectly understanding, which was really a hoot. But I ended up getting into the internet business, into the digital marketing world, through a conversation I was having towards the end of my last enlistment. I had just come to Germany and moved to Texas, and there was another gentleman there who had just come. We had both just come from Germany, went through the arduous task of trying to find a place to live when base housing is full. And you got to go out and just try to find some place to rent. I had a wife and I had 2 kids and one on the way, so I needed a big place, and it was a challenge. And and I just started playing around with the internet. I just started taking websites apart and figuring out how they work, because it was kind of nerdy even then, and I wanted to try to figure it out. And he says, it's a shame we can't use this internet thing to find a place to live before we actually move. And that got me thinking, hey, what a great idea. So a couple months later, I started my first website. It was called General Rent. And basically it was focusing on military communities and finding and listing places to rent. At the time, there was a couple of big rental agencies. I think it was rent.net and apartments.com. And it was way too much money to buy into those services at the time than places in small military communities could afford. So we brought them in at a price point that they could fit, and I did everything. Like a lot of you, I was jack of all trades. I took the pictures, scanned the floor plans, put the websites together, doing everything in Notepad at first, because that was, basically all we had. But that was, it was very successful up until the point that those 2 big companies started to commoditize, and they brought their price point down. And so I couldn't hang anymore. So I ended up having to get a real job. But I ended up being a corporate webmaster for 12 years, where really got to learn from a lot of really great people, including some of you. Just fantastic stuff. And here I am, over 20 years later, still just enjoying the heck out of it. I think a couple of things that really helped me as part of my job, I worked also as an intelligence analyst. So being able to look at situations and understand them and find patterns is really helpful, because I learned how to do that stuff before we had big data. I mean, I don't even think spreadsheets were around when I started doing that stuff. And it helped me to be able to see things from a different perspective. So when I'm watching what Google is doing and I'm reading the things that they're writing and I'm reading about patents, like Bill Slotsky has patent summaries and he puts all that stuff together. And because I did that for that kind of thing for so long, I'm able to spot patterns and understand things a little bit differently than some of the folks who are just coming up in the industry. And I've been trying to figure out how to transfer that ability, because number analysis is really, really important, but you got to have this other piece, I think, too. And I think a lot of you are probably in that similar situation where you understand things, just it's almost intuitive. And I'm very glad that I got to have that ability and to learn how to do that in a way, because it really helps me in my career. Because when I can see things, I just spot it and I say, okay, when you get the data put together, it's going to show you this, and sure enough, it generally does. And sometimes I'm wrong, obviously I'm not perfect, but a lot of times I'm able to spot things because of that training that I had. And like many of you, I never dreamed that I'd be able to do some of the things that I did. Even in basic training, I think of the tower that you have to climb. I don't know if anyone have to do that. I'm deathly afraid of heights, and here I am climbing this stupid thing, and I get to the top, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that.
On delay, on rappel.
I did it, yeah.
Good times.
Then I had to rappel down, and I'm like, oh, geez, it goes from one thing to another.
I remember.
Yeah, but no, I'm very, very grateful. I did a total of 14 years in the Army. Like I said, I got to do some things that very, very few people ever get to do, or I got to see things that very few people get to see, and then understanding the camaraderie of military life and coming back to it and connecting with a lot of you, and just being able to not only have the respect of all of you professionally, but also having that respect of the fact that we all have that shared common experience of having been in the military, or to quote Bill Murray, having been stupid enough to join the Army. But seriously, yeah, I mean, when people thank me for my service, I follow the pattern of my friend John, someone who I was stationed with in El Paso, and he always said, it was my pleasure. And I've started to adapt that response as well, because honestly, like many of you, I got a heck of a lot more out of my time in the military than I put into it. And I'm very grateful for having had that experience.
That's awesome. I think that for most people, I do think that they find that they get more out of it than they put in, if you really look at it objectively. So that's a great perspective.
And another interesting thing that it's extremely rare, other than the people that I served with, to find someone who graduated from the Defense Language Institute, because it's a really, really small community. And I see Michelle Lowry is on here. And I remember meeting her at PubCon in Austin, and I had mentioned that I went to DLI, and she came and introduced herself to me. And she also graduated from DLI. She's an Air Force veteran. And I got to tell you, small community of people. I mean, I've met 3 people, including Michelle, since I've left the military in the last, oh my goodness, over 20 years, who graduated. So that's definitely a rarefied thing.
Awesome. All right, Carl, I'll turn it over to you. You're still here, right?
Yeah, I'm still here.
There we go. All right.
Yeah, it's been great listening to all the stories. I'm just getting so many messages at the moment after who put this together. Yeah,
that would be me.
Yeah, well, you promoted me to 2 spots I'm not due for yet.
Jeremy, you got way too much Photoshop time. That was awesome, though.
Thank you.
I can't believe you cut my hair.
Killed the trademark.
There you go.
Well, I was in the U.S. services. I live in the U.S., obviously. From my accent, you probably can gather that I'm part of that redcoat mob that got kicked out in 1776. So I served in the parachute regiment in the British Army, Cold War warrior like Elmer by the sound of it. Yeah, and I got to see the internal German border, usually on a moldy German plane, a moldy October afternoon or evening or whatever it was in the 80s. For me, I think like Bill, I was a smart kid at school, but like I think many others, it's quite, what the hell am I going to do? And for me, it was a way to get out of the moldy cotton town up in the north of England, and I never looked back. So I served 4 years, and it's 4 years service, 35 years and 50 pounds ago, from my midriff these days. But it's still the things that I was taught, the discipline that I was given, the confidence that it instilled is still here with me today. I think there's one thing that we all share is we've taken what the military gave us, and then we've gone off into the real world, after having that bond of shared misery in military life, and certainly when you're in basic, and applied ourselves to it. So I've been listening to a lot of things like Angie was saying, like, don't freak out. I say to all of my people, don't freak out. We're not running around like headless chickens. And certainly in civilian life, no one's shooting at you, hopefully. So there's no excuse to freak out. Calm down, think. That's what we've got. The ability to one of the things that I'm very grateful for is it was resonating with me with Alan. Scrawny kid, can't do 5 push-ups, was doing 50 on a chair. The things that you could do, whether it be physical and more usually mental, the things that you could be shown how to do, encouraged and supported to do, sometimes with a kick up the backside, but you could do these things that you otherwise would never have thought of in a million years as being humanly possible, never mind being possible by yourself. So the things that I take away from my time and the experience I had, you always remember the good stuff. You tend not to remember the bad stuff, and there's always bad stuff which recruiters don't tell us about. But the things that I took away from it was, to try, determination, to get yourself picked back up if you get knocked down, because you can always try again, or you can always regroup and rethink. I've heard a lot about team building and trusting teammates, and that's absolutely true. But for most of my adult life, or certainly my post-military life, finding the kind of camaraderie that I experienced when I was in the military has been very difficult, to be quite honest. And it's been a rare occasion when I've experienced something close to that level of closeness in civilian life. But nevertheless, you do find it. And now running an organization, I'm trying to inculcate that, because I know how important that is, that the people that are here learn to be able to rely and trust one another. And again, it's not got a kind of situation where someone's going to start shooting at us or dropping an airstrike in downtown Fairfield, Pennsylvania. Which I think this place is so rural and so quiet, it might need a little bit of a wake-up call, but there you go. The other thing, I think it was Bill that said this, mission completion. I say to everybody, and it's one of the principles when I was thinking about what do I want the culture for Wellspring Search to be when I was setting the firm up. And I wanted integrity, no lying. I wanted transparency. We all say this kind of thing, especially in corporate world, but I wanted to mean it. But the most important thing is results matter. It's no good just doing a job 99.9% and going, okay, that's good enough. Maybe that's close enough for government work, but it's not for what we do. Getting the ball over the line, getting whatever it is, getting the mission accomplished is absolutely critical and crucial. And you don't shoot targets, you frickin' destroy them.
Amen.
So, there's no flesh wounds. Get it done. Results matter. Finish when the job is finished, not when the clock strikes 5. So all of these things, the things that I really ought to, partially to my upbringing, because my father was a military policeman. I've actually got a military policeman sitting over here, and I laugh at him every single day. Say hi, Tyler. Hello. Because I know if you join the military police, I mean, you're a recruiter. I think your recruiter, Alan, he really must have done a number on you, because I know that the only reason you join the military police is so that you can have punch-ups with drunken, armed killers. I mean, why? Why would you do that? But then my grandfather, my dad obviously was in the military. My grandfather was in World War II. He was a tank commander. He was a desert rat. So I kind of grew up in that kind of environment. It's kind of like a natural progression. But most of my resiliency, most of the when people comment that I'm fairly calm when things are falling apart, or I'm not blaming people if they screw up. Certainly not the first time. All of these things come from, you learn this stuff because there is absolutely, if all is going to hell, figure out a way past it, figure out a way through it. Churchill said it, keep going. There's no point having this blame game and all this kind of stuff going on. All of these things, and I've tried businesses and failed, and this is my third business where I've succeeded. All of these things, they'll come from that confidence in the feeling that you can get the job done, and you, with a fair bit of luck, a lot of graft, a lot of determination, and hopefully using your God-given brain, you can deliver results. And at the end of the day, I owe that really to Her Majesty, and thank you for this, making me a real American hero at last.
Carl, I've never been shot at doing SEO, but I have dodged a few Google bombs.
Oh man, somebody got the drum thing here.
Oh yeah, that's why you.
Jason didn't do a dad joke yet, so I had to be the first.
All right,
that's why you still want a Bradley. Hey, just quickly, one shout out. Craig Campbell and Gareth Dane. They've made this a yearly thing now. You may know these guys. They're doing a week in shorts for the British charity Help for Heroes, but I am doing it for the Gary Sinise Foundation.
Hey.
Here in Chile, Pennsylvania. So please, Jeremy, if you'll drop the link in there, we've got a donation link for you, the Gary Sinise Foundation.
Will do. Yeah, I saw you post something about that this morning, right?
It's really uncomfortable, mate.
Like, is it snowing there? Like, is that really uncomfortable? Because you look really comfortable right now.
Trust me, this is not California and it's not Florida. I live by a ski resort. Let me give you a clue.
All right, that's awesome. So evidently Michelle is a veteran here as well. Did you want to chime in, Michelle?
Maybe.
I saw the mute go off.
Come on, Michelle.
I don't have shorts on today, but I do have some pretty cool shoes going. So if you want to see these things, there you go.
All right,
guys.
Nice.
Real boots.
You gonna go ahead and do some fast roping later on?
Yeah. Well, we're doing spiking today,
So Jeremy, let's hear your story.
All right, we'll do that
man.
while we're waiting on Michelle to see what's going on there. But all right, so obviously most of you guys know I came up in the Marine Corps. Fairly early on, I went ahead and tried out for a unit called Recon in the Marine Corps, and it's basically special operations. It would be like the Marines version of the Navy SEALs. We don't have as many flashy movies or book deals or any shit like that. Nice, quiet, behind the scenes kind of shit. But tried out for that, and like Doc was saying, it's one of those things where most people don't make it. After a very long process, I was one of 3 people left out of several hundred people, and we're doing a board, and basically everyone is just far enough away that you can't see the little rank insignia on the collars, because of course, camouflage utilities and whatnot. But you of course have to address them by their rank, which made things lots of fun. After you've been going for pretty much 48 hours straight, So they're asking a bunch of questions, your typical board type of thing. And we made it through the first round of the board, get into the second round, and now it's just the three of us who are left. And they asked me, you know, are you gonna, if we let you in, are you willing to stay throughout the holidays and, you know, do some work in the pool, get a little bit stronger in the swimming? And kind of a combination of what was going on, plus, you know, the fact that it kind of threw me for a loop a little bit because I was one of three people who actually passed. I just kind of, I froze up a little bit and I was like, no, I think I've changed my mind. And then I kind of spent the rest of probably the next 3 years of my military career trying to get back into that world. But in that process, I learned that while there's a way to do things, this is applicable in the Marine Corps, combat, whatever you want to look at, and this is applicable in SEO. There's a way to do things, and then there's probably a million other ways to do it. So, you know, throughout my time in the Marine Corps, I always found a different way to do things. I always found a different approach. And I found that useful because usually the way that they wanted you to do things in the Marine Corps was a huge pain in the ass. So I found a lot of unconventional ways to do things, and I found that to be very useful in what we're doing and what we do on a daily basis. But then beyond that is, you know, the mentorship aspect. You know, we all came up, we had a lot of great NCOs and officers who had been in and taught us, educated us, showed us how to do things. And that's something else that I found, you know, a lot of us do in this industry, and it's very valuable. You know, as we're out here sharing, I know, you know, Jason, you've definitely hit some pretty big milestones in your business, and you're one of the people who I've been able to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, like I'm having this particular problem, and you've always shared freely. And that's things that a lot of people in our industry do, most not to the level that you do. But, you know, there's a lot of mentorship in our industry. And, you know, for the most part, everybody who's here is doing that a lot. So these are the kind of things that I found to be especially valuable in the military that really transition over to this field. So that's my story in a nutshell. I'm going to keep mine short. Did Michelle, did you get your technical stuff sorted out?
Let's see. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yay!
Right.
Apparently, even though I've used Zoom, I don't know how many times, I had to give it permission once again to access
Gotcha.
my audio. So
All
first, I know a few of you in here. Jeremy, I don't know you, so it's nice to meet you, and
Likewise.
the other gentleman in here. And Angie, I kind of know you a little bit. I was glad to see another woman in here. Yay! Yay, women vets. So my story, let's see. My grandfather was in the Army. He was a Korea War vet. My mother was in the Air Force and was a Vietnam War vet. She later separated and then joined the Navy. But my grandfather was a linguist in the Korean Army. My mother also went to DLI when she was in the Air Force before she cross-trained. And then, as Elmer, excuse me, kindly mentioned earlier, that's where I ended up as well. I decided when I was about 15 that I wanted to be a linguist, and graduated from high school, couldn't afford to go to college, and so I joined the Air Force pretty much right out of high school. Took the ASVAB, and the recruiter, once he got my score, started trying to talk me into going into nuclear, and I was like, no, that's not, I'm not interested in that. That's not what I want to do. Thank you very much. I would like to be a linguist. And well, you know, that's really hard to get into, and not everybody makes, you know, you're talking to me about nuclear and you're trying to convince me that, you know, being a linguist is going to be hard. Come on, man. So I took the D-Lab and passed that as well, which shocked him. I don't know why, but so I went to basic training. And for linguists, when you go in already, you know how you can go in with no designation and they place you later, or you can go in with a career field already chosen. So when linguists in the Air Force at least go into basic training already designated as linguists, there's additional training that is performed. There are additional testing and other things. You know, we have to start working on a security clearance right off the bat while we're in basic. And I had they also allow you to request what language you're interested in. And I had requested Spanish because I already spoke Spanish, and I thought, well, this will be a breeze. I'll just be a Spanish linguist. And then I learned that If I were chosen to be a Spanish linguist, I would probably have to be in the airborne. I'd probably have to be airborne. And I started hearing all the horror stories about airborne school, like, you know, having to camp out in the snow and eat a rabbit's eyeball or something. I don't know. You know, I'm 18. I'm believing this stuff. I don't want any part of that. So I switched to my second choice, which was Russian, and luckily got that. So I also spent 47 weeks at DLI learning Russian, 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And my first duty station was Germany as well. I was in Wiesbaden for a while. And when I got back to the States, that was about the time that the forces were being drawn down quite a bit. And my choices were re-enlist and go to Japan, or get out and get a big bonus. And I wasn't really interested in going to Japan, and the bonus sounded good, so I got out. The Air Intelligence Agency was also sending out messages asking, if you know anybody who's a Russian linguist who wants to come back in, let us know, because we're short now. So, you know, the government,
That's the government for you.
doesn't know what the other one's doing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, I spent just under 7 years in the Air Force, but of course, you know, had grown up as a brat, had lived everywhere and, you know, overseas a few times. And I think, as Elmer said as well, a lot of what I learned in the military has sometimes served me in the civilian world. At other times it has not, particularly being a woman, because the direct communication style that I learned in the Air Force does not always go over well in civilian situations, particularly from women. And both men and women have a problem with that. So that's something I deal with quite a bit. So fast forward a little bit to 2008, and actually December of 2007, my husband passed away. And so about 3 weeks later, I think, I was fired from my job because my performance had dropped. I couldn't imagine why. So I took a break for a while and was staying with my mom, and, you know, not really doing anything, just trying to kind of recover, and was looking around online. And I'd always been interested in writing and editing. I had been a columnist for the Air Force Times for a while. You know, always had writing and editing extra duties when I was in the Air Force, the PA kind of stuff and my units. And I found this website about online writing. And I happened to run across a woman I followed on that site, posted one day and said, I just got hired by a company that does internet marketing, and I'm trying to build a team of writers. So if you're interested, message me, and you know, I'll send you the requirements and everything, and we'll see what we can do. And I thought, well, I like to write. I'm good at it, and this sounds like I could work from home and not have to work for a company that you know, is going to fire me for horrible reasons. So I applied and was accepted and started writing for, at that time, it was We Build Pages. Now it's, is it still Internet Marketing Ninjas now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing for them in September 2008. By December, I was the assistant editor. And then by February, I was hired by an affiliate marketer to manage a couple of websites for them. So that's when I started learning SEO and became very interested in it, more so to continue to be able to work from home and, you know, continue to be self-employed. Luckily, I had a good coworker there who also taught me a lot about SEO. I was reading everything I could get my hands on, learning about content and optimization, and just continued to grow from there. Worked for a couple of agencies, but for the most part, over the last 11 years, I have been freelance. I have been self-employed, and have fortunately been able to work with some really great people, including Alan, and you know, have met a lot of great people And while I was working for the first agency I worked for, though, that's when I went to PubCon South in Austin. And it hadn't occurred to me really that I might run into any veterans in the SEO industry. I just didn't really think about it. And I was live blogging and Elmer was speaking. So I'm, trying to focus on what he's saying so I can live blog. And suddenly he says, oh, and I used to be a linguist in the Army. And whoa, my ears perked up and I was like, what? You did what now? So when he was done speaking, we had a break. As he said, I went and introduced myself. You're a linguist in the Army. I was a linguist in the Air Force, and we've known each other ever since. And that was, what it was that, Elmer, like 2010 or something, right? I think we're going on 10 years.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, it was a while ago, then I started learning of a few other veterans in the industry and as I said, working with them. And I have to agree with what Elmer was saying about, I was not specifically an Intel analyst the way that he was. However, the things that I learned in Intel, and specifically being a linguist and learning about language, have helped me with my career as both a digital writer and editor. It's also helped me when, researching for optimization. It's helped me with competitive analysis as well. And so I'm very grateful for the skills that I learned while I was in the military and how I have been able to transfer them to what I do now. So things are really good now. I still work from home. I have an awesome client. I'm committing the cardinal sin of freelancing. I have one client, but he keeps me busy and, pays me well. So that's what I'm doing now, and just helping him, increase his traffic from 1,000 visits on one post to 25,000 the next year, and keep taking jobs here and there on the side, and continuing to stay in touch with SEOs and with other writers in the industry. And that's where I am now. So that's it. I hope that wasn't too long.
No, it was perfect. So I know we've all covered kind of the business side of things, what we learned, how we applied it into what we're doing now. I think if you guys want to stick around for a little bit, we could certainly share some stories. Doesn't have to be business related, but some stories of some of the shit that went on in the military. I know Doc's got some pretty badass stories. I know I've got a few. Bill, I'm sure with some of the stuff you did, you've probably got some interesting ones as well. I'll go ahead and run it with one, and then I'll just turn it over. We'll turn it over to Doc, and we'll just kind of play it from there. But, I talked about, taking an unconventional approach to things a lot. And towards the end of my enlistment, my captain had asked me to take a bunch of new guys out on a patrol, teach them how to patrol properly. And Steve and Bill, you'll probably understand this. I was very pissed off when they attached some engineers to that patrol. These guys, when it comes to tactics, they don't know anything. This is a night patrol. We're out here. And I turn around at one point, and the engineer's got a cigarette lit. You can see that for easily 100 meters at night. That's not a good thing. So at some point, I decided that these guys were completely useless. So we jetted off to this area, set up what we call a patrol base, and just staged them out there. We're like, you guys all stay here. Don't move. We'll come back for you later. Along the way, we happened to run into another unit. To this day, I have no idea who they were. Well, I had a whole shitload of booby traps, and I was bored. So we staged literally everybody except me and one buddy. We dumped all of our gear. We went back over to that other unit. It was another Marine Corps unit. This was just training over in Camp Lejeune. So he and I snuck inside their camp. We got by so many guards, I lost count. And we started booby trapping everything. It was the little trip flare. You've probably seen them, Steve and Bill. You trip over the wire, and it's like a very loud explosion, right? So we started booby trapping everything. Rifles, packs, zippers on sleeping bags, you name it. It was everywhere. And we were all the way deep inside of there was this defensive perimeter, and we had everybody booby trapped. And then we got out of there, and along the way, at this point, we'd been in the field. It was a wet, cold winter in North Carolina. We just wanted to have some good sleep. So I'm, just tapping the key on the mic as we're talking, as I'm calling in, our position back to headquarters. And of course, that sounds like you're now out of radio range. So we set up all these booby traps, and we went and hotkeyed the mic a little bit, and then we went and crashed out for the night. We went and did what we were asked, and didn't do it quite the way they wanted it, but I'll tell you, when that other unit woke up in the morning, I'm sure that there were a lot of chewed asses. So that was a fun one for me. You know, we had a lot of situations like that where, you know, we just kind of found interesting ways to do things.
That's amazing. Hey, I wonder if anyone else has the same thing where when you're walking around, sometimes you just have this desire to say hello to everyone with a salutation, and you still use sir and ma'am. Like my kids are like, why do you say thank you, sir, and thank you, ma'am, all the time? I mean, it's like year 2019. What's the scoop? What's going on? I'm like, I don't know, just something that was ingrained in me, and you know, I don't always get a response, but at least I still, you know, put myself out there and say hello and do a salutation. You know,
I think that's a great thing.
Yeah.
You're afraid of getting yelled at by your TI.
That's what it is. That's
really
exactly
good.
what it is. My
Remember
son
your
is saying,
training.
yeah, there you
So-
go.
The
So
same
here's
reason
the-
I never go outside without a hat.
There you go. So here's the important question. Do you still walk around the grass?
Everything, you take it off and you go in.
Sometimes you always think about it no matter what, but yeah, sometimes.
You know, that's the way I
And,
was
you know,
brought up as a kid. You know, it was a yes sir, no ma'am. So
yes.
getting used to that in the military was, you know, it was nothing. I was already there.
That's something
my-
Steve,
that's
what you were
definitely
saying
missing.
earlier about, you know, people who say it's not my job or just, you know, doing whatever needs to be done because it's just what needs to be done. That has been really difficult for me to reconcile other places I've worked, because that's absolutely how I am. That needs to be done. Okay, fine. I'm going to do it. It doesn't matter. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've got another. So just last night, I was changing out my air filters in the house, right? And there's 3 of them. And so I go to change out the air filter, right? And then I look up there, and you know, there's a lot of dust inside the actual, like the thing that you pull down, right? You know.
Okay.
And so here I am now. I'm like, man, like it's gonna be a lot of work. Like I just cleaned out the air filter. I took it out, replaced it. It's going to be a lot of work for me to go all the way back downstairs, try to grab the, you know, the shop vac to kind of clean it all out. Right. You know, but the mentality of the military of like going the extra angle always, right. You know, it's like the classic example of like, do you sweep, like if there's a chair in the middle of like the thing, do you just sweep around it, or do you move the chair and actually do it? Right. There's 2 different types of people in this world. Right. And I think
Sure.
most of us on this call, because of our military background, will always move the chair out of the way, sweep, put the chair back, right? And I think there's so many memes about like you had one job and you just, right? You know, there's so many of them. Like, you know, there's a dead animal in the street and they just kind of, you know, they're, you
Paint
know,
around
they,
it.
yeah, they
When
paint
we
around
when we
it.
have to code, our logic is perfect. Our code is clean. It's annotated, right?
Yeah.
With every change made to the website, we put an annotation in. We just follow the protocol. We don't just say, forget it, or I'll add it later. You just do it.
But that's
No,
what that's the stuff that makes us, you know, who we are, you know, and successful. Like truly, is just going that extra mile. Sorry, Alan.
But I think a lot of that
Yeah,
comes
no.
from the fact. Go ahead, Alan. I'll come in after that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, no, the reality is for me, I learned in the military that sometimes it's good enough for government work is really helpful to my sanity. Okay? Serious, right? There are situations and circumstances where you don't stop now just because you're lazy or it's convenient. You do that extra legwork, that extra footwork. You go the extra 5 miles, because that was ingrained into me in the military, that there are situations and circumstances where you do that. But there's other things in life where it's like, you know what? I got other things that I need to be focusing on that are more important.
Law of diminishing returns.
Right. So sometimes, yeah, you know what? It is good enough for government work. I'm moving on.
Yeah.
That's just
I
my
really
approach.
appreciated when you shared that article, Alan, when you wrote about that, because that's something that I try to talk about in my own work. It's like, I've been in life and death situations. I know what those look like, and this ain't it. You know, let's take a step back and say, okay,
Yeah.
you know, what can we do to get the job done? And then how can we look at fixing issues that might come up later? Because sometimes you just got to get stuff out the door.
I think that's
And
probably
That I keep hearing with everybody, and sent this to you, Jared, but I'm curious how many people here have taken the Strength Finders test and how many actually have strategy in the top 5, because I'm like analyzing the feedback here because we're all perpetual analysts. But I think the whole change, adapt, and overcome sequence it really trains in not just the attention to detail, but it trains strategy as a skill set, where we wouldn't otherwise say, because you need to know strategy isn't an action plan. Strategy is how do I get from A to B. So, in any of the military situations, it was you needed to know the end game. Like the end game doesn't change. You could have all the different stuff that generally is around. Okay, how do we get around this? Okay, tools changed, or who we're working with changed, or a team member is out, but we still have a mission to accomplish. How do we still get there? So I'm just curious how that pans out. If you haven't taken the Strength Finders test, I highly recommend it, especially for your teams. Me being strategy is my top strength, but I'm always looking, to evaluate the strengths of other folks on my team. But I feel like with all the comments here, that seems to be a strong.
Jeremy, is that something you put in the notes and the link to that? I'd love to check it out myself.
Yeah, Angie, shoot me a link to it and I'll throw it in here.
Guys, I mentioned that I was in Brazil for a week and I got back at 6 o'clock this morning. My wife keeps walking over here and tapping her watch and looking at me. So I should probably get to spend some time with my teenage girls before they kill me. But thank you so much, Jeremy, for setting this up. And
it was a pleasure.
Everybody, it was so cool hanging out with you. We need to find an excuse to do this again. Not just for Veterans Day, just to do it because it was a lot of fun.
I've been thinking about doing that anyway. So we'll definitely set something up. We'll make it a recurring thing.
You're amazing.
Try to find
Thanks,
a conference
guys.
where we could meet in person and have a fun rally meetup too. Because
I'm all about it. Did somebody say Vegas? I thought they were Vegas. Actually, Jason, you got a pretty cool place up there. We could go barbecue at your place, right?
Let's
You have
do it.
like an egg.
Right. Anybody coming to
I do.
Minnesota? I'm on the lake, but for the next 6 months, it's
Kinda
hot.
Yeah.
We actually have a thin layer of ice on the lake today.
Oh my God. So, well, thank
Very
you guys
cool.
again. I got to get going.
Enjoy
Later,
your
Steve.
family
Good to see
time.
you, man.
Hey, Steve.
I'm gonna probably hop off as well. I've got a call at 1 o'clock here. So
All right.
Thank you all, Jeremy. Man, this is amazing. Appreciate setting it up.
My
Love
pleasure.
hearing everybody's stories. So thank you so much.
Later, Jason.
All right. Take care,
care,
guys.
man.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Hey, Jason.
Later, guys.
Yep. I think I'm gonna bounce too for food. I was initially thinking we're gonna be on for an hour, and
That was the plan.
right. But military timing.
There you go.
We could have been waiting. No, military timing was we would have waited an hour and then.
There you go.
Kind of like going to the dentist office, yeah.
Hurry up and wait.
Right.
Hurry up and wait.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye, Angie.
Bye, guys.
Take care, Angie.
Angie.
I'm gonna head out as well.
Hello, Angie.
All right. I suppose we can go ahead and call it a wrap then,
Head
since
out
everyone's
to,
dropping out.
Yes. Say thank you guys for having me, and I admire all of you. I've learned from you from the industry for years, and I appreciate everything you've done for industry and country, and pretty much that's it. So,
Thanks for
guys,
joining
thank
us
you.
today.
Thanks, Brian.
Hey,
right.
Brian.
Take care,
Thanks for
Brian.
dropping by.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice to meet you, Doc. Finally.
Same here, Brian.
Bye.
You all be good. And again, Jeremy, serious salute you, man. So
My pleasure.
Grateful. You all take
My
care
pleasure.
today.
All right. Take care,
Bye.
Alan.
Hi, Alan.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye, guys.
Like
All right.
rats deserting a ship here, man.
Yeah. Looks that way. Looks that way. All right. I guess we'll go ahead and close this up then.
Yeah, and Jeremy, if you do decide to do this, this was really